The church was quiet, and Sarah was at the altar praying and seeking the face of God when she heard someone's voice behind her. "Sister Sarah, I have prayed and God has spoken." Immediately she turned back to check who was that was speaking, only to see Brother James looking at her. "God has chosen you to be my wife," he said, and immediately her feet became cold. Was this truly God's will or something else? In a small city in Abuja, there lived a young girl named Sarah. She had recently given her life to Christ and was so eager to learn more about God. She wanted to grow in faith, walk in righteousness, and she surrounded herself with people who she believed will help her to become a strong believer. In the same church where Sarah worshiped, there was a man named Brother James. On the outside, he looked like a true Christian. He prayed loudly so that everyone could hear. He knew many verses by heart, and he often spoke in church whenever the pastor asked questions. But behind his holy appearance, James was known for something else. He was a manipulator. He approached many women in the church, telling them, "God said you are my wife." The wise ones refused him because they sensed that something was wrong. But Sister Sarah was a new member and never knew that Brother James already had a track record in the church. He set his eyes on her. He gave himself a target that he must be with Sarah. Sarah was innocent and trusting. She believed that everyone in church had a pure heart like her own. So when Brother James came to her one evening and said, "Sister Sarah, I have prayed and God has told me that you are my wife," she felt so special. "You mean God can reveal to a man that I am his wife?" Exactly what I have been praying for. Because there is a popular quote that Sarah has seen online which says, "Be so deep in God that a man will have to pray to God before he can find you." So Sarah was excited, thinking this quote has come to pass in her life. A man who is so deep in God has found her in God. She has always dreamt of marrying a godly man, and now this is a strong Christian man saying that God has chosen her for him. She did not question it. She said yes. James became her spiritual mentor, guiding her in prayer and Bible study. Exactly what Sarah desired. She wants a man who will take her deeper in God, teaching her how to pray, showing her the things of God. So when James was doing all these things, she was super, super excited. At first, everything seemed fine until things started changing. James told Sarah that since they were meant to marry and be husband and wife, they can actually start acting the role now. "We don't need to wait for the wedding," he said to her one day after service. "Our love is already blessed by God. You can see it by the spiritual growth you've experienced just by being with me." Sarah felt uneasy. She had read in the Bible that a man and woman should wait until wedding. But, James was her spiritual leader. He knew more than her, right? So she obeyed because you cannot know more than your teacher. That was her belief. And from that day, James used her trust against her. He told her that their secret was for the glory of God and she must not tell anyone. Every time she doubted, he reminded her that she was the chosen one for a spiritual man like him, and that if she disobeys him, she is disobeying God. Months passed by and Sarah became more and more confused. Deep inside, she knew something was wrong, but James had convinced her that this was the way. Then one day, James finally asked her to marry him. Sarah thought things would get better after marriage. She believed that once they were officially husband and wife, things would feel right again. So she agreed. Little did she know that marriage was not the happy ending she had hoped for. Once they were married, James changed. He stopped caring for her. He never spent time with her, never wanted to help her with anything. Sarah noticed that the man who once showed her so much love and attention and spiritual guidance too has all of a sudden become cold and distant. She would she would He would leave early in the morning in the name of going to church to pray and to study, but return late at night, barely acknowledging her presence. Even when she tried to engage him in conversation, he will reply with prayers telling her he's receiving instructions from God and doesn't want to be disturbed. The prayer and Bible study that once brought them close together faded into distant memories. Luckily for them, Sarah got pregnant. And guess what? She got pregnant with twins. That maybe this pregnancy would draw James close to me and also repair my marriage. But they were not ready for this blessing. They struggled financially, and the more they struggled to feed, the more James became more distant. He stopped praying with her. He barely spoke to her. At home, he will not talk to her, but in church, he will be acting all spiritual. Even when Sarah tried to talk to the pastor about it, the pastor called both of them together, and James denied everything in front of the pastor. She had seen James countless times talking to women in the church, and whenever she confronts him, he will claim that he's having a counseling session with them. Sarah cried at night, wondering how things has gone bad. This same brother that she considered to be a spiritual mentor is now the person who is tormenting her physically. What about the times she had questioned him before marriage? The little moments when her heart told her that something was not right. She always felt this notion in her heart that something is not right about James. But she ignored everything and chose to trust James because he is her spiritual mentor. She valued the words of James over her own feelings. After a while, James began to see Sarah as a burden. He blamed her for the financial struggle, saying that ever since she had come into his life, things had gone wrong. "You are bad luck," he said one evening when another business failed. His resentment and anger grew, and he became more wicked towards Sarah. She tried talking to him, but anytime she tried talking, he would lash out. "Maybe I married the wrong woman," he would say. "Maybe I never truly heard from God, because I don't understand why you have become a bad luck to me." Sarah tried to remind him always about their love, about their commitment, and what the word of God said, but James wanted nothing to do with her. For a while, he stopped coming home. For a while, he stopped coming home, and as usual, he was using the church programs as an excuse. Sarah knew he was avoiding her. Outside, they looked like a happy couple, but inside, she was suffering. One evening, as she sat alone holding her newborn babies, James came home with a strange look on his face. "Sarah," he said, "I have heard from God again." Immediately she sat up, hoping and thinking that it's good news this time around. Maybe James is willing to change. Maybe God has convicted James. Maybe her husband wants to be a better person. But what James said next shocked her. Sarah, God told me that I must divorce you. Sarah felt like someone has hit her. Divorce? But God hates divorce, she said. Why will he say such a thing to you? James insisted, I don't know, but I must obey the voice of God. Sarah refused. You cannot divorce me. I know the word of God, and the word of God says that God hates divorce. What do you mean by saying God asked you to divorce me? She knew deep down that this was not God speaking. She begged James to pray with her. She begged him to come and see the pastor at least for guidance. But James refused and would not listen. He had made up his mind, and then one night, without saying a word, James packed his things and left. He abandoned Sarah and their babies without looking back. The first year, second year, fifth year, down to 10 years. Days turned into months and months turned into years. Sarah struggled raising her twins alone. She faced shame, pain, and loneliness. But through it all, she grew stronger. She read her Bible for herself and realized the truth. James had never been a man of God. He has used God's name to manipulate her. 10 years later, Sarah had become a strong, independent woman. She has raised her children with love and wisdom, teaching them to never let anyone deceive them. One day, while she was in church, she heard whispers from people. James had returned back to Abuja. Around, he was looking old, tired, and dejected. He came begging for forgiveness. But Sarah had moved on. She had found peace in God and would never allow anybody use God's name to deceive her again. Dear listeners, what did you learn from this story? The morals of this story that I want you to learn is that firstly, you must have a personal relationship with God. Do not rely on anyone to hear from God for you. Learn how to seek God yourself. Secondly, discernment is key. Not everyone who quotes the Bible or prays loudly is truly godly. Test the spirit behind their words. Anyone who uses God said to control you is not speaking for God but themselves. And also, if something feels wrong, if something feels wrong, please question that feeling. Don't just put it off, especially when it is pointing to a red flag. Now, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and leave a comment down below for me. What do you think about spiritual manipulators? We have a lot of them today. Have you seen one? Have you had an encounter with one? Don't forget to share the story with someone who needs to be saved from a spiritual manipulator. Once again, I am 001, your love coach, bringing you relatable relationship and marriage stories, converting principles to folktale stories for you.